Business update across the globe. We've got Rotus Oddiri here with us. Rotus, how's it going? How are you?
Good morning. Hi, everyone. Mr. K. Good morning to all our viewers out there. Asia markets picked up yesterday. With respect, I think what we saw was bargain hunting. The market has been down for quite a while as far as the stocks are concerned, and basically what we've seen is that when the markets have been down for quite a while, you see what's called bargain hunting. And then when the markets have been up so bargain hunting is basically when you buy stocks that are falling, right, so that you can take advantage of lower prices. And then you took advantage of lower prices, and profit taking is when stocks have been on a high for quite a minute, and then you take advantage of the prices that are basically higher. So the Asian markets picked up yesterday, in Tuesday trading. Part of the reason is ARM, but we're seeing, we're expecting the IPO. This is, ARM is bought by SoftBank back in, 2016 or so, $32 billion worth. They're valuing them now at about $64 billion. They're looking at the NASDAQ listing later on this year, in fact, next month, as a matter of fact. We could see the biggest IPO in 2 years, initial public offering on the exchange over in the United States. Now, the London Stock Exchange really wanted this chip maker here in London, but they decided to go with the United States. Rivian, in the AI space, electric vehicle space, $70 billion dollar valuation back in 2021. Uber was 75. You could see essentially ARM in that space. Something to note though, China is very, very much a significant player, or it's very important to ARM as far as sales are concerned, because they're into chip making. So the United States has been very, very has been stepping on the necks of a lot of companies to try to reduce how many chips China gets. So it will be interesting to see how things go forward from here. But it's a big IPO that folks are looking forward to. You were talking about Vice President Shettima heading to South Africa for the BRICS summit, which of course was coined by Goldman Sachs economists a few years ago. I was talking about the potential of these economies. That's Brazil, Russia, China, India. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, Xi Jinping is heading over there. He's going to be there for 3-day visits. Second international trip so far this year. They're looking to expand, but they also have a development bank. They've had a development bank now since 2014. I think they've lent out about 33 billion. They want to lend it out in local currencies. They want to reduce their reliance on the dollar. They've also talked about possibly having their own unified currency. I know that the Brazilian president has called for that. But as far as how realistic it is, not too sure. They were downgraded because Russia is part of the summits, and of course the war and everything else, and then Russian exposure because of the impact of sanctions have impacted them. I mean, the summits will happen. I don't know if there are any deals that will come out of it. Frankly, every nation that comes out to talk about dethroning the US dollar, I just don't know how realistic that is, especially where interest rates are now and everybody's piling into US assets. All right, moving on from that, the UK, I've been addicted to borrowings and debts and how that impacts economies around the world. Public sector net borrowing in the UK just came out not too long ago. 4.3 billion. I mean, it was about 900 million pounds at this time last year. So it's a massive jump, although it wasn't as high as what was forecast from the markets. They forecast a 5 billion pound climb. We need this office. The OBR stands for Office of Budget Responsibility in the UK. And this is an office that is supposed to put out notes and advise the government basically on fiscal responsibility, which I talked about heavily yesterday when it comes to Nigeria's debt. Now, what this means, if public sector net borrowing has not increased as much as markets forecast, it might give Mr. Hunt, Jeremy Hunt, Chancellor of the Exchequer, some room to cut taxes ahead of next year's crucial elections for Rishi Sunak and the Tory party. So, maybe it gives them some headroom. So it's a good sign. It might have jumped heavily, but it didn't jump as far as the estimates were concerned. So that's pretty good for them. All right, we think we come to Nigeria now. And JP Morgan's reports that had everyone talking yesterday, one of their, from their excerpts of August notes for Nigeria, it was released 17th. We estimate CBN net FX reserves at 3.7 billion, significantly lower than prior estimates, owing to larger than expected currency swaps and borrowing against existing reserves. I mean, as I said, when I read this, I almost fell out of my chair. It is their own estimates. That's what they're estimating. But if you look at what, we put this up when CBN released their 2022 financials, backing out 7.5 billion with the securities lending from JP Morgan and Goldman, and then another 6.8 billion in currency forward obligations. If you notice here, there wasn't much information on currency swaps. Currency swaps are essentially what they mean. You exchange a currency either with banks or with other entities in order to, to boost your reserves. You have to return that what you take in the swap back at the end. It's an agreement, right? So this wasn't there, but JP Morgan has their own estimates in terms of, if we take a look at the estimates that they have, they included currency swaps, and their estimate is 21.3 billion. So this is their liability assumptions on the FX reserves, and that is what has to be paid back. So they've got the 6.8 billion in FX forwards that you saw in the financials. They are part of this securities lending along with Goldman Sachs. But is that currency? Now they did put in the reports that this is their estimates and it is subject to change. So, I think what we need now is for the CBN to come out and, let us know what's in the reserves. Because again, that was as of December of 2022. So we are in August of 2023. We paid off a $500 million Euro bond that the Debt Management Office announced earlier this year. That was good. But again, these are, we don't know how much defense has taken place. But again, this speaks to my point of why the government had to move to a managed float. So let's get these definitions out, starting with a fixed exchange rate. This is your currency peg that we have been doing for a while. When a government or central bank sets a fixed exchange rate for its currency, with a foreign currency or basket of currencies, you must continue to defend this fixed peg. If the government says, oh yeah, today the rate is 800 naira per dollar, it's not moving. We are valuing the naira at 800. No matter what you do, you must continue to sell in order for it to be able to maintain. We move to a managed float. Let's look at the managed float. Managed float is a system, this is where we are, of floating exchange rate in which some government or central bank seems to influence the rate. This is by intervening. So this is where we are. You might let demand and supply move it up and down, but you intervene. Finally, the fixed rates is where I love this graphic here. You basically just let market forces determine the rates, and your reserves are not used at all. But the key thing is for the fixed exchange rate and the managed floats, the reserves come into play because your level of firepower, gunpowder, is what will determine whether you can defend the rate. And that is why we are where we are, because the exchange is so low. Or rather, the reserves are so low, excuse me. Let's see, what else we got? Dele Alake, of course, you guys already spoke about him and the solid minerals, and he says he has something up his sleeve. Here's my wish list, right? I would like for him to get a $1 billion lithium deal with Elon Musk and Tesla. Also attract mining giants Rio Tinto and BHP to Nigeria. A specific roadmap for ending solid mineral smuggling, which is estimated to be about 5 billion or so between 2012 and 2018. Who remembers PAGIM, Presidential Artisanal Gold Mining Initiative, under President Buhari from 2019? Is it dead or alive? Are you going to resurrect it? And then the Solid Minerals Development Fund. And then finally, I heard Ayo talking about we need money for education, we need money for healthcare, we need money for this, we need that, we need this. Here's PD. This is my favorite clip.
Everything starts from money. We want to cure diabetes, you need money. You want to affect the wealth gap, you need money. You want to do education, you need anything. You need money. That's it. Everybody leave.
Okay.
Need money.
Okay, real quickly, a couple of things we should look at, Rotus, because of time is fast spent. Number one will be, part of the things we have not even talked about is a leadership crisis in CBN. And I think the CBN should come out clean with us as regards all of this that is happening. And also, I'm going to drag some people into this fray this morning. Ernst & Young that audited the reports, and also KPMG that audited those CBN reports. They must be able to tell us what is going on, and they must be able to issue a statement reacting to what JP Morgan is saying, true or false. So the CBN, EY, and KPMG, we're waiting to hear from you guys. before today runs out. We just want clarity. We're not indicting anybody. That's one. Number two, as regards the state of play in our economy, I have a report somebody sent me about what really made GSK leave. And this is from an inside source. And he was very, very clear about the problems we keep on talking about. The misalignment and lack of understanding on policies. He talked about the latest devaluation that destroyed the value. Consumption, power, which has declined by the current economic moves. Lack of rigor and due process in decision making. Lack of transparency in government economic matters. Nigeria, they say, is now simply a distraction to the global business. Nigeria slipped from £250 million business for GSK to £50 million business in 7 years. And the downturn continues. But he also says that if GFK were to see a $500 million business in Nigeria in the next 10 to 15 years, they'll stick on. He also went ahead to talk about the consumer sector. Retail revenues have dipped over 30%. Suddenly, the working capital need has gone up with 60% with sudden devaluation. Most companies have now been decapitalized. That means many are scaling down and more shutdowns are to happen. More job losses will happen. Hence, the conversation about transparency in the first place. And hence my point this morning about the CBN reacting to this JP Morgan report, so we even know where we are going. But, and also to the new ministers, please let's also remember we can't run a country on impulse. And I think it's the impulse at which we are running the country that's also detrimental. That's why the foreign investors we want are not going to come awash with their hot money at good rates. We should be circumspect in all of this. Circumspect. We are too impetuous. I rest my case.
Ayo, very quickly, sorry. Rufai, so just to be clear, you are displaying a fundamental misunderstanding of how audited accounts work. There's no need to bring in Ernst & Young. There's no need to bring in KPMG. So what they did is they audited the accounts. Remember, financial statements are at a snapshot in time. So Ernst & Young and KPMG did their job diligently, and they analyzed these financial statements as from 2015 to 2022. So they don't have to say anything. It's the central bank that has to come forward and give us information from January of this year to August. The JP Morgan report, remember, please, I carefully said this. JP Morgan said this is an estimate, and they could be wrong. So there's no need to bring in any KPMG or Ernst & Young. They've done their work. Those are from audited financials from 2015, 2022. It is the CBN that has to come out and tell us what is the state of the reserves between January of this year and where we stand today.
So the argument is the financial reporting on the side of CBN. That's what they're faulting.
That's what they're faulting now.
Who is that? What are you talking about?
The JP Morgan and all
No,
the
JP Morgan is just making, if you put up, JP Morgan is just making an estimate on where the reserves stand today because of those currency swaps.
Estimate means they don't have the finite details.
Right, but because the financials didn't give us enough details on the currency swap. So it is up to the central bank to come out and say, what is the current state of the currency swaps and where do the reserves stand right now? It's that simple.
We have to go. I was just going to point out one thing on the international, on the global view with regards to Domino's filing bankruptcy in Russia, and the fact that they've been criticized for a while for still remaining in Russia despite, the West's pressure. And this just speaks to the fact that the sanctions are biting, and companies are folding up. Coca-Cola is still in there. Unilever still justify their being in there, even though they've been criticized for contributing to the GDP in Russia. But just to talk about the update in terms of the fact that sanctions do work, and despite Russia saying, still talking tough, companies are filing for bankruptcy and leaving the country.
I feel for anybody that's doing business there.
Yeah. Is OBR not the same thing as DMO?
No, the debt management office manages that for Nigeria is who issues debt and everything. That's the Office of Budget Responsibility, essentially.
But budget responsibility could be the management.
So that's that's two key questions. So DMO is debt, right? And then OBR is Office of Budget Responsibility.
Office of Budget. We have budget which is managed by what's his name now?
Ben Akabreze.
Ben Akabreze.
Okay, so you're talking about we ran out of time, but that's responsibility is the key word there.
We'll continue the conversation tomorrow.
For sure.